what I have here is an example of a safety zone piece, and I just kind of created a line drawing here. But let's talk about how we're going to render this with regards to using wood veneer. So what I did here was I went ahead and found some wood veneer online, and I brought them in as an image. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use add an image feature. So first I open my drawing in Sketchbook Pro, and then I'll use add an image. I'll go into my library, and I'll go ahead and click wood. Now, if you look here on my desktop, I have some wood veneers, and I brought one in just to kind of show you that you don't want to go too dark. Okay, if you go too dark, what happens is if you start to want to lighten and darken it, it doesn't give you a whole lot of range. So what you want to do is find a tone that allows you to see the grain, but also gives you a little bit of ability to go light and go dark. It's almost kind of like marker sketching, right? And what I did here when I brought in the piece of wood was I went in and I sized it to kind of fit my drawing format. So if I have like an 11 by 17 file format, I'll probably size a piece of wood around 10 or 11 inches in height and maybe about 6 inches in width. And what that does is it kind of gives me something proportional to work with, which I can expand and contract and not make the wood too overly distorted with regards to proportion. Okay, so what I'll do here is I'll bring in my piece of wood here, which is about, I believe, a 10 by 6 inch sheet of walnut veneer. So what's nice about Sketchbook Pro is that it puts on a separate layer, and all I need to do now is to take that wood and see if I can increase the width so it can cover my entire rendering. Okay, you see? Okay, now it's a little bit hard to see because the wood is a little opaque, so what I recommend doing is pulling down the opacity. Okay, you see? I went to my layer editor and pulled down the opacity just enough to kind of see what I need to remove. Okay, so what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to go here and use my editing tools, and I'm going to start to chop away bits of the wood tone, which I don't think is going to help me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the outside edge. Okay, you see how I'm using the marquee selector? Or really not the marquee, but I'm just using the line selector. And I'm just kind of moving around the outside, see? So what I did was I just removed the outside. Don't try to get in there and take everything away at the same time. That's too much work. What you're going to do now is go to the invert tool. Okay, see this one here? It's almost to the very last tool. And you click that once, and what that does is now you see the marching ants right over here. So what that means, it's going to reverse what it's removing. So instead of removing what's inside the selection, it's removing the outside. So all I have to do now is hit delete. So go to your keyboard and hit delete. Ta-da! Instant wood tone. Okay, and then click the X to get out of that. Okay, so you're deselected that. What you want to do now is take a look at what you have. Okay, maybe bring up the opacity. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I want to now think about my 1, 2, 3 sides. Remember that from 132B and 232 where we learned about rendering with markers, and we said, okay, there's a light side, there's a medium side, and there's going to be the very dark side, which is going to be in shadow. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to do in Photoshop or in Sketchbook Pro. So if you like the value that you have here, okay, see that looks pretty good right about there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to go to the layer editor and I'm going to duplicate it. Okay, just like that. Watch what happens. Did you see it get darker? Okay, so I think you guys kind of got a hint to what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to go ahead and use my selection tools. I'm going to systematically delete the surfaces which I think okay, I'm going to delete those surfaces which I think I want to be lighter. Okay, so I just take it a little bit at a time. All right, now you see how I selected this kind of T shape. So instead of trying to select everything, I take it one layer at a time. So I take the section that I can control the most and I get rid of that. You see? You see how easy that was? And then I come back over here and I get rid of this part. Now you have to kind of go slow, guys. Like just to give you a chance to. Oh, hold on. Let me hit the escape key. I went a little too far. See, sometimes when you're doing this, you kind of put the cart in front of the horse, or the horse in front of the cart, whatever you want to call that, and you end up selecting the wrong thing. So what I did, just to kind of explain, I tried to be a little over ambitious, and what it did was it accidentally selected more than I needed. So that's what happened there. So we'll hit the X, and that locks in place. So you can see why I selected what I did, because I want to try to get some contrast in my rendering. Okay, and then to get the shadow parts underneath here, what I'll do is I'll take this last part that I did. Okay, ooh, I need to remove a little bit more. Sorry, I just saw an area that is also my number 2 site, which is right here. There we go. Okay, so now I'm ready to do my shadow side, which is the underside, right underneath the cabinet. So I'll take this last layer I just worked on, and we'll go duplicate layer. See it get even darker? Okay, so it's getting even darker up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove all of this by selecting that bit, and then remember how we went inverse, right? We're going to remove everything on the outside. Okay, and there you go. Okay, now I know it doesn't seem like much, but here's what you're going to do next to get the full contrast that you want. Alright, so what you're going to do is you're going to go through all the layers, and you're going to adjust the opacity. Okay, here we go. So let's go to the underside. Okay, the last layer that we did. You see that? I know it's very hard to see, but it's the last layer, and you're going to go to layer, adjust, and you want to go to brightness control. Okay, so you'll pull that window down, and what you want to do is either make it brighter or darker. Okay, I don't know if you can see the difference, but it's definitely getting much darker. Or actually, I'm wrong. Sorry about that. I want to go the other way. My preview window was a little bit off. There we go. That's a little too dark. So I want my... See, what you want to do is look at this window here. But as it's such a small patch, it's hard to tell. There we go. That's much darker. Okay, and you systematically go to the other ones. Like, do you want more contrast against these walls? Well, let's take a look. All right, maybe maybe I just didn't have my opacity control all the way up to get the contrast I want. Right, so I can do something like that, and that gives me a bit of contrast in the wood tones. Okay, now here's what's going to help your rendering at the very end. So if you're happy with everything, I recommend that you commit to this contrast level, so all your rendering surfaces are together now. Right now, I know I missed a few things here, but I don't think it's going to hurt the process of showing you a demo. So what I'm going to do now is, as you know, every time you get to the end of a rendering, you need to define it, right? So what you want to do is open a new layer, and I recommend locking this down. And what you're going to do now is you're going to come in, and I'm just gonna render a little bit because I don't want the video to go too much longer. But I think you guys already know how to do all this, so I'll go ahead and use my drawing tools. Okay, and then I'll look at my palette of colors. So I want to stay on the warm side, and I know there's going to be a pardon me. We're going to use our shape tools to help render in some nice hard lines, right? That gives a little bit of depth in the drawing. I'm using a little bit of a cream yellow to kind of keep the line work a little bit warm and keep it a little more fresh in the rendering. maybe darken it just a little bit here on this side. And it looks really yellow, but that's okay. That stays in the warm range. And then once you kind of have all that figured out, what you want to do now is use your black line work. And if you feel comfortable, put it on another layer. Okay, and what that's going to do, it's going to help you define your doors. Right, you have door openings. And just like any good perspective, what you always want to do is you want to, line yourself up with edges. So that's going to tell you right away if you're in perspective. Okay. So I might make this a double door. Maybe it's a split door, like that. And remember how we talked about maybe some shoe storage? See how that all goes? It's quite nice. When you work out the veneers early on, and you come back in and cut all the edges with highlight and shadow. Right? Oh, shadow. We didn't talk about shadow. All right, let me talk about shadow. Okay. Really quick, cast shadows. I recommend that you keep that on a separate layer. So open a new layer and use shadows. Now what you want to do is you want to use this tool here, the polyline tool, and you want to use pretty dark value, pretty dark, because you got to overcome a lot of stuff. So I would say push it more towards the cold grays, like 9 or 10. It's okay to go that dark. And then you're going to take your polyline tool and you're going to trace. You see the little marching ants? And when you return to the origin, double click, and it's going to give you a closed feature. We hope, okay? And then make sure your tolerance is around 100. And success! We got a shadow, okay? Let's do it again. Let's go back to the polyline tool. Now, instructions for doing shadows are really simple. Just, oops, that didn't close the line very nicely. Go back to some of your Design 132A or 232 lessons, and you'll probably find a shadow tutorial there that you guys probably did in class, and that should. I'm just doing a little touch-up work here, okay, and that should help remind you how to plot shadows, okay. Now you're probably wondering, hey Dave, those shadows look really dark. You think you're going a little too aggressive? I go, no. All right, I'm not. But we do want to make sure that they look like they're part of the rendering, right? So what I recommend doing is once you've plotted those shadows and you want to make them part of the rendering, make the shadows translucent. So what I would do is change the layer style from normal to multiply. And you see? Do you see what happened? Now they did go pretty black, okay, and that's intentional because I knew that I had an opacity control along the layer editor where I can dial it down a little bit so I can see a little bit of the wood grain on the other side. So when you zoom in on all this, okay, see how you get that depth? Look at that depth in the drawing. That's really nice. And that cold gray, again, I recommend cold gray because cool colors recede, and that's what you want. You want that green, the greenness of the gray to work against the yellow browns. Okay. And yeah, there you go. So that's how you would go ahead using wood veneers on a Sketchbook Pro rendering, and how you be able to edit, duplicate, and and you essentially take advantage of the layering nature of Sketchbook Pro, and able to get the three different values that you need for your rendering to pop. Okay, and obviously at the end, highlight and shadow and line work all come together to make that happen. Okay, so when you're done with the rendering and you're pretty happy with it, there's no real reason to keep anything locked. I would probably just go into your original line drawing. As you're going through your layer editor, just go ahead and collapse everything, so now they're all one composite, and that's easy. And I don't think you're going to need to do more than 3 or 4 layers. Seriously, I think that's going to be all you need to achieve this level of rendering, right? And if you want, you can always still come in and clean up a little bit, but don't clean it up to the point where it's sterile. I still feel renderings that have a little bit of draw through and a little bit of construction are still king. They still look terrific, right? And I'm not going to do it now because this video is getting a little bit long, but don't forget to open a layer if you need to add hardware, like handles and hinges and those things. You can just zoom in and sketch in, so you guys already know how to do that. Okay, all right, so hopefully that was helpful. Again, this video will be posted up on YouTube, and I'll definitely provide a link on our Beachboard page. All right, so until next time, see you later.